Poetry writing hacks, 10 tips on how to write a poem. If you are writing a poem because you want to capture a feeling that you experienced, then you don't need these tips. Just write whatever feels right. Only you experience the feeling that you want to express, so only you will know whether your poem succeeds. If, however, your goal is to communicate with a reader, drawing on the established conventions of a literary genre, conventions that will be familiar to the experienced reader, to generate an emotional response in your reader, then simply writing what feels right to you won't be enough. See also, poetry is for the ear, and when backwards newbie poets write. These tips will help you make an important transition away from writing poetry to celebrate, commemorate, or capture your own feelings, in which case you, the poet, are the center of the poem's universe, towards writing poetry in order to generate feelings in your reader, in which case the poem exists entirely to serve the reader. Poetry, 10 tips for writing poems. Know your goal. Avoid cliches. Avoid sentimentality. Use images. Use metaphor and simile. Use concrete words instead of abstract words. Communicate theme. Subvert the ordinary. Rhyme with extreme caution. Revise. Tip number 1. Know your goal. If you don't know where you're going, how can you get there? You need to know what you are trying to accomplish before you begin any project. Writing a poem is no exception. Before you begin, ask yourself what you want your poem to do. Do you want your poem to explore a personal experience, protest a social injustice, describe the beauty of nature, or play with language in a certain way? Once you know the goal of your poem, you can conform your writing to that goal. Take each main element in your poem and make it serve the main purpose of the poem. Tip number 2. Avoid cliches. Stephen Minott defines a cliché as a metaphor or simile that has become so familiar from overuse that the vehicle no longer contributes any meaning whatever to the tenor. It provides neither the vividness of a fresh metaphor nor the strength of a single unmodified word. The word is also used to describe overused but non-metaphorical expressions such as tried and true and each and every. 3 genres: the writing of poetry, fiction and drama. 405. Cliché also describes other overused literary elements. Familiar plot patterns and stock characters are clichés on a big scale. Minott. 148. Clichés can be overused themes, character types, or plots. For example, the Lone Ranger cowboy is a cliché because it has been used so many times that people no longer find it original. A work full of clichés is like a plate of old food, unappetizing. Creative writing tips. More creative writing tips. Clichés work against original communication. People value creative talent. They want to see work that rises above the norm. When they see a work without clichés, they know the writer has worked his or her tail off, doing whatever it takes to be original. When they see a work full to the brim with clichés, they feel that the writer is not showing them anything above the ordinary. In case you hadn't noticed, this paragraph is chock full of clichés. I'll bet you were bored to tears. Clichés dull meaning. Because cliched writing sounds so familiar, people can finish whole lines without even reading them. If they don't bother to read your poem, they certainly won't stop to think about it. If they do not stop to think about your poem, they will never encounter the deeper meanings that mark the work of an accomplished poet. Examples of clichés: busy as a bee, tired as a dog, working my fingers to bone, beat red on the horns of a dilemma, blind as a bat, eats like a horse, eats like a bird. How to improve a cliché? I will take the cliché, as busy as a bee, and show how you can express the same idea without cliché. Determine what the cliched phrase is trying to say. In this case, I can see that busy as a bee is a way to describe the state of being busy. Think of an original way to describe what the cliché is trying to describe. For this cliché, I started by thinking about busyness. I asked myself the question, what things are associated with being busy? I came up with college, my friend Jessica, corporation bosses, old ladies making quilts and canning goods, and a computer, fiddlers fiddling. From this list, I selected a thing that is not as often used in association with busyness: violins. Create a phrase using the non-cliched way of description. I took my object associated with busyness and turned it into a phrase: I feel like a bow fiddling an Irish reel. This phrase communicates the idea of busyness much better than the worn-out familiar cliché. The reader's mind can picture the insane fury of the bow on the violin, and know that the poet is talking about a very frenzied sort of busyness. In fact, those readers who know what an Irish reel sounds like may even get a laugh out of this fresh way to describe busyness. Try it. Take a cliché and use these steps to improve it. You may even end up with a line you feel is good enough to put in a poem. Tip number 3: Avoid sentimentality. Sentimentality is dominated by a blunt appeal to the emotions of pity and love. Popular subjects are puppies, grandparents, and young lovers. Mine at 416. When readers have the feeling that emotions like rage or indignation have been pushed artificially for their own sake, they will not take the poem seriously. 132. Minot says that the problem with sentimentality is that it detracts from the literary quality of your work. 416. If your poetry is mushy or teary-eyed, your readers may openly rebel against your effort to invoke emotional response in them. If that happens, they will stop thinking about the issues you want to raise, and will instead spend their energy trying to control their own gag reflex. Tip number 4: Use images. Be a painter in words, says UWEC English professor emerita, poet, and songwriter Peg Lauber. She says poetry should stimulate 6 senses. Sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste. Kinesiology, motion, sentimentality is dominated by a blunt appeal to the emotions of pity and love. Popular subjects are puppies, grandparents, and young lovers. Mine at 416. When readers have the feeling that emotions like rage or indignation have been pushed artificially for their own sake, they will not take the poem seriously. 132. Minot says that the problem with sentimentality is that it detracts from the literary quality of your work. 416. If your poetry is mushy or teary-eyed, your readers may openly rebel against your effort to invoke emotional response in them. If that happens, they will stop thinking about the issues you want to raise, and will instead spend their energy trying to control their own gag reflex. Tip number 5: Use metaphor and simile. Use metaphor and simile to bring imagery and concrete words into your writing. Metaphor. A metaphor is a statement that pretends one thing is really something else. Example: the lead singer is an elusive salamander. Simile. A simile is a statement where you say one object is similar to another object. Similes use the words like or as. Example: he was curious as a caterpillar, or he was curious like a caterpillar. This phrase takes one quality of a caterpillar and projects it onto a person. It is an easy way to attach concrete images to feelings and character traits that might usually be described with abstract words. Note, a simile is not automatically any more or less poetic than a metaphor. You don't suddenly produce better poems if you replace all your similes with metaphors, or vice versa. The point to remember is that comparison, inference, and suggestion are all important tools of poetry. Similes and metaphors are tools that will help in those areas. Tip number 6: Use concrete words instead of abstract words. Concrete words describe things that people experience with their senses. Orange, warm cat. A person can see orange, feel warm, or hear a cat. A poet's concrete words help the reader get a picture of what the poem is talking about. When the reader has a picture of what the poem is talking about, she can better understand what the poet is talking about. Abstract words refer to concepts or feelings. Liberty, happy, love. Liberty is a concept, happy is a feeling, and no one can agree on whether love is a feeling, a concept, or an action. A person can't see, touch, or taste any of these things. As a result, when used in poetry, these words might simply fly over the reader's head, without triggering any sensory response. Further, liberty, happy, and love can mean different things to different people. Therefore, if the poet uses such a word, the reader may take a different meaning from it than the poet intended. Change abstract words into concrete words to avoid problems caused by using abstract words. Use concrete words. Example: she felt happy. This line uses the abstract word happy. To improve this line, change the abstract word to a concrete image. One way to achieve this is to think of an object or a scene that evokes feelings of happiness to represent the happy feeling. Improvement: her smile spread like red tint on ripening tomatoes. This line uses 2 concrete images, a smile and a ripening tomato. Describing the smile shows the reader something about happiness, rather than simply coming right out and naming the emotion. Also, the symbolism of the tomato further reinforces the happy feelings. Red is frequently associated with love, ripening is a positive natural process, food is further associated with being satisfied. Professor Jers belabors Kara's point, extension: now, let's do something with this image. She sulked in the garden, reticent, hard, unwilling to face his kisses, or unable. One autumn morn she felt her sour face ripen to a helpless smile, tomato red. Her parted lips whispered, "Hello, sunshine." Okay, the image has gotten embarrassingly obvious now, but you can see how the introduction of the tomato permits us to make many additional connections. While Kara's original example simply reported a static emotional state, she felt happy. The image of the ripening tomato, which Kara introduced as a simple simile to describe a smile, has grown into something much more complex. Regardless of what the word tomato invoked in your mind, an abstraction like happy can never stretch itself out to become a whole poem without relying on concrete images. DGJ. Tip number 7: Communicate theme. Poetry always has a theme. Theme is not just a topic, but an idea with an opinion. Theme equals idea plus opinion. Topic: the Vietnam War. This is not a theme. It is only a subject. It is just an event. There are no ideas, opinions, or statements about life or of wisdom contained in this sentence. Theme: history shows that despite our claims to be peace-loving, unfortunately each person secretly dreams of gaining glory through conflict. This is a theme. It is not just an event, but a statement about an event. It shows what the poet thinks about the event. The poet strives to show the reader her theme during the entire poem, making use of literary techniques. Tip number 8: Subvert the ordinary. Poets' strength is the ability to see what other people see every day in a new way. You don't have to be special or a literary genius to write good poems. All you have to do is take an ordinary object, place, person, or idea, and come up with a new perception of it. Example: people ride the bus every day. Poet's interpretation: a poet looks at the people on the bus and imagines scenes from their lives. A poet sees a 60-year-old woman and imagines a grandmother who runs marathons. A poet sees a 2-year-old boy and imagines him painting with ruby nail polish on the toilet seat, and his mother struggling to not respond in anger. Take the ordinary and turn it on its head. The word subvert literally means turn upside down. Tip number 9: Rhyme with extreme caution. Rhyme and meter, the pattern of stressed and unstressed words, can be dangerous if used the wrong way. Remember sing-song nursery rhymes? If you choose a rhyme scheme that makes your poem sound sing-song, it will detract from the quality of your poem. I recommend that beginning poets stick to free verse. It is hard enough to compose a poem without dealing with the intricacies of rhyme and meter. Note: see Jers's response to this point, in Poetry is for the Ear. If you feel ready to create a rhymed poem, refer to chapters 6 to 10 of Stephen Minet's book 3 Genres, The Writing of Poetry, Fiction, and Drama. 6th ed. For more help. Tip number 10: Revise, revise, revise. The first completed draft of your poem is only the beginning. Poets often go through several drafts of a poem before considering the work done. To revise. Put your poem away for a few days, and then come back to it. When you reread it, does anything seem confusing? Hard to follow? Do you see anything that needs improvement that you overlooked the first time? Often, when you are in the act of writing, you may leave out important details because you are so familiar with the topic. Rereading a poem helps you to see it from the outsider's perspective of a reader. Show your poem to others and ask for criticism. Don't be content with a response like, "That's a nice poem." You won't learn anything from that kind of response. Instead, find people who will tell you specific things you need to improve in your poem.